By the time morning settled over Seattle, Claire Carter had already been awake for hours beside her mother's bed in their small Beacon Hill apartment. Beyond the window, the city was washed in a dull gray light, but Claire barely noticed it. Her attention remained fixed on the uneven rhythm of Ruth's breathing, and on the painful truth she kept trying to push away. Her mother sounded much weaker than she had the week before. "Still here?" Ruth murmured, opening her eyes. "Where else would I be?" Ruth managed a tired smile. At 58, she looked older than Claire remembered. 6 months of lung cancer treatments had thinned her face and stolen much of her strength. Yet the stubborn warmth in her eyes remained. Claire was 26 and worked as a nurse at a neighborhood health clinic. Her salary covered rent, groceries, transportation, and little more. Since her father had died when she was young, Ruth had raised her alone, cleaning offices at night and private homes during the day so her daughter could finish nursing school. That afternoon, Dr. Samuel Reed had given Claire the news she had feared. The standard treatment was failing. There was another therapy available through a private oncology program. It had shown encouraging results in patients like Ruth, but insurance would not cover the full amount. Their share would be $15,000. "There are no guarantees," Dr. Reed had warned. "It is an opportunity, not a promise." For Claire, that was enough. She looked down at the graduation ring on her right hand. Ruth had bought it after Claire finished nursing school. The ring was modest, compared with expensive jewelry displayed in downtown boutiques, but it held a small, genuine diamond set in gold. Claire knew exactly what it had cost her mother. Not only money, years, extra shifts, sore hands, missed Sundays, meals Ruth claimed she was not hungry enough to eat. "Mom," Claire said quietly, "I know how I'm going to pay for the treatment." Ruth followed her daughter's gaze and immediately understood. "No, it is only a ring. It is not only a ring. You matter more." Ruth struggled to sit upright. "I worked nearly 2 extra years to buy that for you. Every time I looked at it, I remembered that my little girl made it. That we made it." Claire's eyes burned. "And what good is a symbol of our victory if I lose the person I wanted to share it with?" Ruth turned her face away. Claire took her hand. "You taught me that family comes before possessions. Let me live by what you taught me." The following morning, Claire carried the ring downtown. At a small second-hand jewelry shop near Pioneer Square, an elderly jeweler named Walter Benson examined it carefully. "Good stone," he said. "Good gold. I could offer $8,000. Claire's stomach tightened. "I need $15,000. "I understand, but I cannot pay retail value for something I have to resell. It is for my mother's cancer treatment." Walter lowered the magnifying lens and looked at her with genuine sympathy. "I wish that changed the market value." Claire swallowed. "What is the most you can do?" $8,000. She left with the ring still in its velvet box. The next day, she tried again. One store offered $6,000. Another offered $7,000. A polished boutique near downtown barely looked at the ring before telling her it was too ordinary for their clientele. By late afternoon, rain had begun again. Claire stepped onto the slick sidewalk, clutching the velvet box and medical paperwork inside her coat. She was calculating how many extra shifts she could work when she collided with someone. Her folder dropped. Papers scattered over the wet pavement. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "My fault." A tall man in a dark suit crouched immediately to help gather the pages. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair touched by gray near his temples. Unlike most people rushing through the rain, he seemed completely unconcerned about ruining his expensive coat. Then he picked up one particular page. "Ruth Carter, Oncology Treatment Authorization." He returned it quickly. "I'm sorry. I did not mean to read that." Claire took it from him. "Thank you." She started to leave. Someone in your family is sick? Claire stopped. Normally, she would have ignored such a question from a stranger. Something in his voice made her turn. My mother. Cancer? She nodded. The man's expression changed. My mother died from cancer 2 years ago. For a moment, the noise of traffic seemed distant. He glanced at the velvet box in Claire's hand, then at the jewelry store behind her. You're selling something for the treatment. Claire stiffened. How did you know? Lucky guess. Not very lucky. He almost smiled. My name is Logan Mercer. He handed her a business card. Mercer Systems, Chief Executive Officer. Claire recognized the company. Nearly everyone in Seattle did. She looked from the card to him. You're that Logan Mercer? Unfortunately, yes. Despite herself, she laughed. Logan pointed toward a crowded cafe across the street. Would you let me buy you a coffee? Public place, plenty of witnesses. You can leave whenever you want. Why? Because I think I may be able to help. Claire's instinct told her to walk away. Her mother's face told her to listen. So she crossed the street with him, carrying a ring she was prepared to lose, unaware that before the evening ended, everything she believed about fortune, strangers, and kindness would begin to change. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee and wet coats. Claire chose a table near the front window where half the room could see them. Logan seemed to understand. He did not sit too close. He did not ask intrusive questions. He simply ordered 2 coffees and waited. Finally, he nodded toward the velvet box. May I see the ring? Claire hesitated, then opened it. Logan studied the small diamond. Graduation? Nursing school. Your mother bought it? Claire looked up sharply. How did you know? You keep looking at it like it belongs to both of you. That answer disarmed her. She worked herself half to death so I could graduate. Then she worked even more to buy that. And now you're selling it to save her. I would sell everything I own. How much are the jewelers offering? Between $6,000 and $8,000. How much do you need? $15,000. Logan leaned back. And alone? Claire gave a humorless laugh. I am a clinic nurse supporting my mother. Banks appreciate touching stories, but not enough to ignore income requirements. Other family? No one who can help. My father died when I was little. It has always been Mom and me. Logan looked down at his coffee for several seconds. Then he said, I will pay for the treatment. Claire thought she had misunderstood. What? All of it. She stared at him. You don't even know me. No. There has to be a condition. 1. Claire's shoulders tightened. Logan noticed. The condition is that you keep your ring. That is not a condition. Then call it a request. Why would you give $15,000 to a stranger? Because I can. That is not a reason. He nodded, accepting the challenge. My mother was a public school teacher. When she became sick, money was not the problem. I could buy specialists, private rooms, experimental medications, but I could not buy more time. His voice softened. One nurse stayed late with her almost every night. She was studying oncology and barely making enough to pay tuition. One afternoon, I learned she had sold a gold chain inherited from her grandmother to purchase medication my mother's insurance had delayed approving. Claire listened silently. When I asked why she would sacrifice something so personal for someone she barely knew, she said, It is jewelry. Your mother is a life. Logan looked at Claire's ring. When I saw you outside that jewelry store, I remembered her. What happened to the nurse? I paid the remainder of her education anonymously. She later found out. Today she works with cancer patients. Claire's suspicion had not disappeared, but something warmer was breaking through it. I don't want charity. Neither did she. Then what do you call this? One person carrying part of another person's weight because he happens to have stronger shoulders today. Claire lowered her eyes. If I agree, the hospital gets the money directly. Absolutely. You don't get access to my accounts. I don't want it. No contracts saying I owe you anything later. None. And you understand that helping my mother does not buy you anything from me. Logan's expression became serious. Claire, if anyone ever uses generosity to purchase control over you, it was never generosity. That sentence settled the argument. They went directly to the oncology center. Dr. Reed looked from Claire to Logan with obvious confusion. What is Mr. Mercer's relationship to the patient? Logan answered before Claire could. A friend who wants to help. Payment was arranged directly through the hospital. By evening, Ruth could begin the new treatment. When Claire brought Logan home, Ruth was horrified. You met him today? Yes. And he is paying for my treatment? Yes. Claire Carter. Logan nearly laughed, but wisely stopped himself. Ruth looked at him. Young man, why? Because your daughter reminded me of someone my mother loved. He told Ruth the same story. When he finished, Ruth remained quiet. Then she asked, What do you expect in return? Nothing. Nothing, Logan thought. Perhaps dinner. Ruth narrowed her eyes. That sounds suspicious. Mom, at least let me finish dinner because I would like to know the woman who raised someone willing to sell her most treasured possession without hesitation. Ruth glanced at Claire. And what did my daughter give you? Logan's answer came softly. Hope. The word surprised all three of them. Hope that success had not made me as cold as I feared. Hope that there are still people who remember what matters. Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. Fine, you may stay for dinner. We don't have much, Claire warned. I wasn't planning to eat your food. An hour later, Logan returned with takeout, soup for Ruth, flowers from a corner shop, and dessert Claire insisted nobody needed. They ate around a tiny table beneath a flickering kitchen light. Logan, who owned a penthouse overlooking the city, laughed more during that simple dinner than he had at any corporate banquet in years. And Ruth noticed. So did Claire. The new treatment began the following morning. Logan arrived before Claire and Ruth reached the oncology wing. You came back, Claire said. I said I would. She had expected his kindness to fade once the dramatic moment passed. Wealthy men, she imagined, probably enjoyed rescuing people before returning to lives too busy to remember them. Logan kept returning. He brought books for Ruth, healthy snacks for Claire, and once appeared with a ridiculous yellow blanket because Ruth complained that hospital blankets looked too depressing to heal anybody. 3 weeks later, Dr. Reed called them into his office. The tumor has decreased by nearly 1/3. Claire gripped Ruth's hand. So it is working? It is encouraging. Very encouraging. We continue carefully. Ruth cried. Claire cried harder. Logan stood quietly behind them until Ruth reached back and pulled him into the embrace. You are family now, she declared. Apparently I have no choice. No choice whatsoever. Ruth regained strength slowly. She began taking short walks, practicing breathing exercises, and eating with more appetite. One afternoon, the three stopped at a small family restaurant near Green Lake after a medical appointment. Halfway through dessert, Ruth put down her spoon. Logan, do you like my daughter? Claire nearly dropped her glass. Mom, Logan smiled. Very much. As a friend? He glanced at Claire. Not entirely. Ruth nodded, satisfied. And you, Claire? This is not an interrogation. It absolutely is. Claire looked at Logan. During the previous weeks, she had started recognizing the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. She noticed how he remembered which tea Ruth preferred, and how he sent Claire messages after difficult shifts, asking whether she had eaten. Yes, she admitted. I like him. Excellent. Problem solved. Nothing is solved, Claire protested. Later, Walking beside the lake while Ruth rested on a bench, Claire explained what frightened her. "You paid for Mom's treatment. How do I know gratitude isn't confusing my feelings?" Logan did not appear offended. "Then we don't rush." "You mean that?" "We remain friends. No expectations. Your mother gets well. When life is no longer a crisis, we see what remains." Claire smiled. "What if nothing remains? Then I will still be grateful I met you." That answer made resisting him considerably harder. Over the next 2 months, Ruth's improvement continued. The tumor shrank by more than half. Logan spent so much time at their apartment that Ruth eventually placed a spare toothbrush in the bathroom. "You practically live here," she told him. "My penthouse has better furniture." "Then why are you always on our terrible sofa?" Logan looked toward Claire, who was making coffee. "Better company." One Saturday morning, he suggested something more serious. "My apartment has several bedrooms. Ruth could have more space, a private bathroom and room for her exercises. There is also a balcony where she could grow plants." Ruth's eyes brightened. Claire's did not. "You want us to move in? I want you comfortable. I don't want to become dependent on you." "Then don't." "What does that mean?" "Keep working. Pay whatever portion of expenses feels right to you. Maintain your own savings. Keep your independence. Living with someone should not require surrendering yourself." Ruth pointed at Logan. "I like this man." "Mom." "What?" "He has excellent arguments and apparently a balcony." Claire laughed despite herself. The move happened several weeks later. Logan's home occupied the upper floors of a modern building overlooking Seattle. Ruth walked into the guest suite and stared at the bathroom. "Our old kitchen was smaller than this." "You can redecorate," Logan said. "Dangerous offer." "I have insurance." Claire stood near the windows, unsettled by the luxury surrounding her. Logan approached. "Too much?" "A little." "You want to go back?" She looked at him. "Do you? I spent years building a home everyone admired, and almost no one shared. Your mother's plants on my balcony would improve it." "And me?" "You already have." That evening, Claire met Logan's 65-year-old father, Dr. Robert Mercer, a retired cardiologist, with white hair and a gentle manner. Robert brought Ruth flowers and gave Claire a delicate necklace. "It belonged to Logan's mother," he explained. "She once told me that if my son ever found a woman who reminded him what his heart was for, I should give it to her." Claire's eyes filled. "I can't accept something this personal." Robert smiled. "That is precisely why you should." Later, before leaving, Robert pulled Logan aside and gave him a second small box. Inside was his late wife's engagement ring. "When you are certain," Robert said. Logan looked toward Claire, laughing with Ruth in the kitchen. "I already am." Robert placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Then be patient enough to let certainty become hers too." 2 months after the move, Dr. Reed entered the consultation room holding the latest scans. He was smiling before he sat down. "I believe we can officially say remission." Claire covered her mouth. Ruth blinked as if the word belonged to another language. "No cancer?" "No visible evidence in the scans. We will continue monitoring closely, but today you may celebrate." Ruth laughed through her tears. Claire hugged her so tightly, Dr. Reed jokingly reminded her that recovered patients still needed oxygen. Logan waited until Ruth released her daughter, and then embraced them both. That evening, Ruth cooked for the first time since becoming seriously ill. Nothing expensive. Roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and the apple pie Claire loved as a child. "This," Ruth announced, "is the meal of people who intend to live." The happiness lasted quietly for several months. Claire continued working at the clinic. Logan returned more regularly to Mercer Systems, though his priorities had changed. He created a medical assistance fund for employees' families. and began financing community health programs in neighborhoods where patients often delayed treatment because of cost. Then, one Tuesday morning, Claire arrived at work and immediately sensed something was wrong. People stopped talking when she entered. Her closest co-worker, Paige Wilson, pulled her aside and handed her a phone. An entertainment website displayed photographs of Claire leaving Logan's building, entering his car, and eating at upscale restaurants. The headline described her as a poor nurse who had captured a technology millionaire. The article suggested she had exaggerated Ruth's illness to gain his sympathy. Claire felt physically sick. "They think I lied about my mother?" "I don't," Paige said. "But people will. Some already did," patients whispered. Co-workers asked questions disguised as jokes. By lunch, strangers were posting comments about Claire's appearance, salary, motives, and character. Logan called. "I saw it. Your company is going to hate this. My company survived recessions, lawsuits, product failures, and competitors. It will survive my girlfriend being a nurse. They say I planned everything." "Did you?" "Of course not." "Do I believe you?" "Yes." "Does your mother?" "Yes." "Then breathe." But Claire could not dismiss it so easily. That evening she found Ruth reading the articles. "Mom, please don't look at those." Ruth closed the tablet. "Do you know what people said after your father died?" Claire shook her head. "They said I couldn't raise you alone. Some told me to send you to relatives because I worked too much. Others said a cleaning woman had no business dreaming of sending her daughter to college." Ruth touched Claire's hand. "If I had built my life according to people who knew nothing about it, you would not be sitting here. What if this hurts Logan? Let Logan decide what hurts Logan." When he returned home, Claire met him at the door. "Maybe I should leave until this disappears." Logan stared at her. "Leave me?" "Temporarily." "No. Logan, no newspaper gets to decide who sleeps in my home or stands beside me. It could damage your reputation. My reputation is not more important than your dignity." The next morning, Mercer Systems issued one statement. Logan confirmed that Claire was his partner and described her as a healthcare professional of exceptional integrity. He refused to discuss private medical details, but made clear that accusations against her were false. He ended by saying his personal life was not available for public negotiation. The story gradually faded. 6 months later, Claire could barely remember most of the headlines. One Saturday, however, Ruth caught Logan hiding a small box. She waited until he left the room. "Claire." "What?" "He has jewelry." Claire froze. "What kind?" "The kind men hide when they are about to make terrible financial decisions." "Mom." Ruth smiled mischievously. "Wear the blue dress today." "How do you know he wants me to wear the blue dress?" "I raised you. I can also read a nervous millionaire." When Logan entered moments later, Claire immediately saw it. His hands were steady. His eyes were not. "Would you come somewhere with me?" "Where?" "A place connected to the worst day of your life." "That sounds romantic." "Trust me." Claire looked at Ruth. Her mother suddenly became fascinated with her tea. And Claire knew both of them were hiding something. Logan drove toward downtown without explaining. They eventually stopped near the neighborhood where Claire had spent that rainy afternoon visiting jewelry stores. A private rooftop above an old brick building had been decorated simply with candles, white flowers, and a table for two. Seattle's evening skyline stretched around them, silver beneath the clouds. Claire turned slowly. "What is this?" "The jewelry shop where we first met is on the next block." "You remembered?" "I remember nearly everything about that day." Logan led her toward the railing. "I remember thinking you looked exhausted and furious at the world." "I was. You also looked determined. I needed to save my mother. And I thought I was helping you." Claire smiled. "You did." "No. That is only half the story. His voice trembled slightly. I had money, a company, a home people photographed for magazines, and more possessions than one person needed. Yet every morning, I woke up feeling as though my life had become an efficient machine with nobody living inside it. Claire's eyes filled. Then I met you. Logan lowered himself to one knee. Claire covered her mouth. He opened a velvet box. Inside were 2 rings. One was the elegant engagement ring that had belonged to his mother. The other made Claire stop breathing. Her nursing graduation ring. My ring. Logan smiled. I found Walter Benson. How? I visited every second-hand jeweler around the neighborhood until someone remembered the nurse who had begged for enough money to pay for cancer treatment. But I never sold it to him. You eventually left it with another shop before you met me. You told me later where. The owner still had it in inventory. Your mother helped me confirm the engraving. Claire was already crying. I bought it back. Why? Because this ring represents something my mother's diamond never could. It represents a daughter who was willing to surrender the symbol of her greatest achievement for the woman who made that achievement possible. He lifted the second ring. And this one represents what I hope comes next. Claire's hands shook. Claire Carter, will you marry me? Her laugh broke through the tears. Yes. I had a longer speech. You can give it after. Yes? Yes, Logan. Yes. He placed the engagement ring on her finger and returned the graduation ring beside it. When Claire stared at both, Logan whispered, Your past and our future. They married the following year. Claire refused an extravagant ceremony despite Logan's offers. Instead, they chose a small church near the neighborhood where she had grown up. Ruth cultivated flowers on Logan's balcony and used them in the decorations. Paige stood beside Claire as maid of honor. Dr. Reed attended with his wife. Several nurses from the clinic came. Mercer Systems executives sat beside Claire's former neighbors, and nobody seemed to care which guests arrived in luxury cars and which came by bus. Robert walked Claire down the aisle. Before handing her to Logan, he said, Take care of her. Logan answered, With my life. During the reception at a modest country property outside Seattle, Logan stood to speak. A little more than a year ago, I thought wealth meant having enough money that no emergency could frighten me. Then I met a woman facing an emergency money could solve, and she taught me that money was the least important part. He looked at Claire. What mattered was why she was willing to lose everything. Claire rose and joined him. And what mattered to me, she said, was learning that receiving help does not always make us weak. Sometimes another person's kindness gives us enough strength to stand again. Ruth wiped her eyes. Robert pretended he had dust in his. Later, Claire and Logan announced that part of their resources would fund a community medical center, providing assistance to families facing uncovered treatment costs. They named the patient support program after both their mothers. Not long afterward, Claire learned she was expecting a child. Ruth celebrated so loudly that Logan joked the entire building probably knew before Robert did. One quiet evening, Claire sat beside her mother on the balcony. Ruth touched the old graduation ring. You almost lost this. Claire shook her head. No, I almost used it exactly for what it was meant to represent. And what was that? Everything you taught me. Life did not suddenly become perfect because Ruth was healthy and Claire had married Logan. There were disagreements. Claire sometimes worked longer shifts than Logan thought sensible. Logan sometimes tried to solve problems with money before listening long enough to understand them. Ruth continued believing that every family decision required her opinion. Their first child arrived healthy, followed some years later by another, and the Mercer home became louder than Logan's former silent penthouse could ever have imagined. The community medical center also grew. Claire insisted that it offer more than financial assistance. Patients needed transportation, counseling, meals for caregivers, explanations of confusing paperwork, and sometimes simply another human being willing to sit beside them. She knew how loneliness magnified fear. One afternoon, several years after Ruth's recovery, a young nursing assistant named Maya arrived at Claire's office. Her father needed a medication the family could not afford. Maya placed a thin gold bracelet on Claire's desk. "Do you know anywhere that buys jewelry?" Claire stared at it. For a moment she was 26 again, standing in the rain with a velvet box in her hand. She pushed the bracelet gently back. "Keep it." Maya shook her head. "I need the money." "No, what you need is help." Claire contacted the support fund. The medication was covered that afternoon. When Logan heard what had happened, he smiled. "The circle keeps moving." Claire looked down at her graduation ring. "Only if somebody chooses to keep it moving." Years passed. Ruth grew older, but remained fiercely energetic. She volunteered at the medical center several mornings each week, usually ignoring Claire's reminders not to exhaust herself. One evening, after closing, Claire found her mother sitting in the center's small garden. "You should be home." "I spent enough years rushing home because I was tired," Ruth said. "At my age, I would rather stay where something beautiful is happening." Claire sat beside her. From inside came the muffled voices of nurses finishing paperwork and a child laughing with his father. Ruth looked at her daughter. "Do you ever think about that rainy week?" "Often." "Do you think everything happened because you were willing to sell the ring?" Claire considered it. "No." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "I think everything happened because many people made choices." "What choices?" "I chose you over the ring. Logan chose compassion over walking away. You chose to trust help even though you hated needing it. Dr. Reed chose not to give up when the first treatment failed. Robert chose to welcome us instead of judging us. Paige chose friendship when strangers chose gossip." Ruth smiled. "That sounds wiser." Claire leaned against her mother's shoulder. As she grew older, Claire understood something she could not have understood on that first desperate day. Sacrifice alone does not guarantee a reward. Good people can lose precious things and never receive them back. Illness does not always end in recovery, and generosity does not function like a bargain with fate. She had seen enough patients to know that life could be painfully unfair. That made kindness more important, not less. If compassion guaranteed a prize, it would merely be another investment. Its meaning came from being offered without certainty. Logan had not helped because he knew Claire would love him. Claire had not offered her ring because she expected a millionaire to appear. Ruth had not worked those exhausting years because she knew her daughter would someday repay her. They acted because, at those moments, love asked something of them. And they answered. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Logan took Claire back to the rooftop where he had proposed. There were no reporters, photographers, or elaborate decorations this time. Just dinner, soft lights, and the familiar Seattle skyline. Claire turned the old graduation ring around her finger. "You know," she said, "people once thought this was the beginning of our story." "The ring? The day you saw me trying to sell it." Logan smiled. "Wasn't it?" "No. The story began long before you." "With Ruth?" "With every night she cleaned buildings after I went to sleep. Every morning she came home pretending she wasn't tired. Every time she told me education mattered, even when she could barely pay rent." Logan nodded. "And maybe my part began with my mother teaching children she knew would never be able to repay her." "Exactly." They sat quietly for a while. By then, their children were old enough to tease them about being sentimental. Ruth was approaching old age with the same stubbornness she had brought to cancer. Robert spent much of his retirement working with the medical foundation. The tabloids had long forgotten Claire. The families helped by the foundation had not. Claire had received hundreds of letters. Some came from parents whose treatments had been covered. Others came from young nurses receiving scholarships, caregivers given temporary housing, and patients who simply wanted to say that someone had listened when they were afraid. None of those letters mentioned Logan's net worth. That amused Claire. A fortune had begun the foundation, but money was not what people remembered. They remembered being seen. One winter morning, Ruth suffered a minor fall at home. She recovered, but the incident frightened Claire more than she wanted to admit. At the hospital, Ruth caught her daughter's anxious expression. "You are doing it again." "Doing what?" "Trying to keep me forever." Claire looked away. Ruth squeezed her hand. "You could not control whether the treatment worked all those years ago. You cannot control time now." "I know." "No, you understand it. Knowing is different." Claire's eyes filled. Ruth continued gently. "You once believed saving me meant preventing anything bad from ever happening. But that was never the gift." "What was?" "The gift was the years we got to use." That sentence stayed with Claire. She began measuring life differently after that. Not by preventing endings, by filling the middle. She visited Ruth more often without checking her phone. She left work on time, when her children had school performances. Logan reduced meetings he had attended out of habit rather than necessity. Robert taught the grandchildren to grow tomatoes, most of which squirrels ate before the family could harvest them. Ordinary days became precious, because nobody pretended they were unlimited. And Claire finally understood why her graduation ring had always meant so much to Ruth. It had never represented jewelry. It represented time transformed into love. Hours of cleaning became tuition. Exhaustion became opportunity. Opportunity became a nursing degree. And years later, that nursing degree helped Claire sit beside frightened patients and say, with complete sincerity, "You do not have to carry this alone." The ring had traveled through a remarkable story, but its deepest meaning had never changed. It represented one person choosing another, again and again. Many years later, Ruth's hair had turned completely silver. Her grandchildren knew her as the grandmother who baked too much, cheated shamelessly at card games, and told embarrassing stories about their mother. One spring afternoon, the family gathered at the country house outside Seattle. Ruth sat beneath a tree, watching the children run across the grass, while Claire and Logan prepared lunch. Robert, older now and walking with a cane, sat beside her. "We did well," he said. Ruth smiled. "Our children did. We had something to do with it." "A little." Claire heard them and laughed. That evening, after everyone had gone inside, she remained on the porch. Logan joined her. "Thinking?" "Dangerous habit." "About what?" Claire looked at the two rings on her hand. "The strangest thing is that I once thought the worst day of my life was the day I couldn't raise enough money for Mom. And now? Now I think it was the day that revealed what everything else was worth." She rested her head against his shoulder. Over the years, Claire had learned not to tell the story as though poverty had been magically rewarded with wealth. That was never the lesson she wanted her children to inherit. Life was not a machine where sacrifice entered one side and happiness came out the other. She had cared for people who loved fiercely, and still lost someone. She had watched generous families endure hardships no stranger ever arrived to solve. She knew better than to promise that goodness always received a visible reward. What she believed was quieter and, to her, far more important. A human life becomes meaningful through what we are willing to give attention to while we still have time. Ruth had spent years earning very little money, yet she had given Claire an education, courage, and the certainty of being loved. Logan had possessed enormous wealth, yet before meeting Claire, he had lacked something no bank account could provide: a reason for that wealth to matter. Claire herself had once believed accepting help meant losing independence. Age taught her that independence and isolation were not the same thing. Strong people did not always carry everything alone. Sometimes, strength meant allowing another person to hold one end of the burden. She also learned that possessions were neither shameful nor sacred. A ring could be beautiful. A home could bring comfort. Money could purchase treatment, build clinics, and give exhausted families room to breathe. But none of those things decided their own meaning. Human hands did that. Money could become vanity or medicine. A house could become a monument to loneliness, or a place where children ran through hallways. A ring could remain inside a velvet box forever, or it could become proof that love valued a life more than an object. The older Claire became, the less impressed she was by dramatic gestures, and the more she treasured quiet consistency. Logan had changed her life by paying for treatment, yes, but their marriage had endured because he continued making coffee when she was tired, listening when she was afraid, and apologizing when he was wrong. Ruth had once sacrificed years of labor for her daughter, but their deepest memories were built from ordinary evenings at the kitchen table. Love revealed itself spectacularly, only once in a while. Most days, it arrived wearing work clothes. Claire looked through the window at Ruth, laughing with her grandchildren. She finally understood that the greatest gift she had received was not the ring Logan recovered, the comfortable life they built, or even the extraordinary second-chance medicine had given her mother. It was the realization that whatever we possess becomes smaller when compared with the people entrusted to our care. And whatever kindness we give does not disappear. It travels, from a mother to a daughter, from a nurse to a grieving son, from a stranger to a frightened family, from that family to hundreds of others. Sometimes it returns to us. Sometimes it does not. But somewhere, in a life we may never fully see, it keeps moving forward. Claire closed her hand around the old ring and smiled. She had once been ready to lose it for love. Only after a lifetime did she understand that, in every way that truly mattered, love had been inside it all along.